They say every story has a breaking point. Mine came the day a trembling voice split the summer air, shrill and cracked, screaming, "Sheriff, don't make me laugh. Around here, I'm the sheriff." Her words still echo in my head, heavy with madness. I turned, and there she was, Carol Peters, my neighbor, my nightmare, standing in the gravel like some self-appointed queen of Silver Lake. Her vest hung 2 sizes too small, a dollar store badge crooked on her chest, but nothing about her was funny. Because in her hands was a real gun, a heavy black pistol raised and pointed straight at my daughter's chest. Emily had just walked up from the dock, towel loose around her shoulders, her skin still damp from the lake. To anyone else, she looked like a carefree young woman, smiling, enjoying a summer afternoon with her family. But Carol didn't see that. Carol saw an enemy, someone who had dared to refuse her, someone who wouldn't bend or bow or pay. And now she was screaming about trespassing, waving a weapon, believing she was judge, jury, and executioner. I felt Sarah's nails dig into my arm. My wife was frozen, lips pressed tight, eyes wide with horror. Behind us, our grandchildren, 2 little statues on the porch, stood paralyzed mid-game, watching the scene unravel. Even the cicadas stopped buzzing, as if the whole lake itself held its breath. But Emily didn't flinch. She stood tall, calm, her hands lifted just slightly, her voice steady as steel. "Put the weapon down right now, ma'am." She didn't raise her tone, didn't beg or tremble. Every syllable came out like a command carved from iron. Carol laughed, not the laugh of someone sane. It was high, broken, jagged, like glass splintering in the heat. "You don't give me orders," she barked, eyes blazing. "I'm the president of this community. You're trespassing, and I'll arrest you myself if I have to." Arrest, citizens, arrest. The words twisted through the trees, surreal, absurd, but the gun in her shaking hand made it deadly real. My knees felt weak. All I could see was my daughter, the same little girl I once taught to ride a bike, now standing in a stranger's crosshairs, and she didn't even blink. That's when Emily spoke again. Lower this time, colder. "My name is Emily Clark. I am the sheriff of this county. You are committing a felony. Drop the weapon." The word sheriff hit Carol like a stone to the skull. Her head jerked. Confusion flickered in her eyes. For a moment she almost faltered, but then her lips curled into a sneer. "You, sheriff," she spat, her voice rising into a shriek. "Don't make me laugh. Around here, I'm the sheriff." And me, I stood helpless on that porch, my heart pounding in my throat. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just another petty HOA skirmish. It wasn't about trash cans, bylaws, or fines. No, this was the storm's final act, the day everything boiled over into something dangerous, irreversible. I wanted to shout, to throw myself between them, to do anything but stand frozen. But my daughter's eyes locked with mine for half a second, and in that look I understood. She had control. This was her battlefield, not mine. And Carol had no idea who she was pointing that gun at. To her, Emily was just another visitor at our lake cabin. She didn't know she was standing face to face with the elected sheriff of this county. She didn't know the woman she threatened with a pistol had real authority, real power, and backup only a call away. She didn't know she was seconds from handcuffs. But before I tell you how it ended, before the sirens screamed and the cuffs clicked shut, you need to know how it began. Because this nightmare didn't start with a gun in the driveway. It began months earlier, on the day Sarah and I finally moved into our dream cabin by the water. The day we thought we had found peace. We had saved for 2 decades, chasing a dream of quiet mornings, loons calling across the glassy lake, grandkids running barefoot on the dock. For a while we had it. Coffee steaming on the porch, fireflies at night, laughter echoing across the water. It was perfect. Heaven, until Carol Peters arrived in her fake patrol cart, clipboard clutched like a weapon, sunglasses hiding the sharp eyes that never stopped watching. And from that moment on, our heaven began to crack. It should have been the first weekend of peace. I still remember that morning like it was etched into glass. The sun rose soft over Silver Lake, light spilling across the water in ribbons of gold. Sarah was humming in the kitchen, coffee brewing in her old percolator. I was outside with my tape measure, marking the spot where I planned to build her planter box. Just a small project, nothing grand. That's what retirement was supposed to be for. Quiet tinkering, slow mornings, the simple joy of creating something with my hands. Then I heard it, a strange buzzing sound, low at first, then louder, closer. Not a lawn mower, not a chainsaw. No, it was wheels on gravel, a golf cart, common enough for lake communities, but this one was different. It had a blinking yellow light strapped on top, spinning like it was warning the world of danger. The sides were painted black and white, crudely, as if someone had tried to turn it into a police cruiser and given up halfway. The cart rolled to a dramatic stop at the edge of my driveway, and out stepped Carol Peters. She didn't smile, she didn't wave. She marched across my lawn as if she owned every blade of grass. Dark sunglasses hid her eyes. A thick clipboard was tucked beneath her arm, clutched like a weapon. Her chin jutted high, posture stiff, and her voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Welcome to Silver Lake Community Association." Not a neighborly greeting, not a "how do you do?" No, her words sounded more like a border guard inspecting passports. That was the first time I met her, and I should have known then she wasn't just a neighbor. She was going to be a storm. I offered my hand, tried to keep it light. "Well, I'm Frank. This is my wife, Sarah. We're just getting settled in." She didn't take my hand, didn't even look at Sarah. Instead, she shoved a heavy binder into my chest. "Here's your welcome packet. You'll find the bylaws, architectural rules, dues schedule, and community standards. Dues are $500 a year, payable next month." I blinked at her, stunned. "Dues?" "Yes," she snapped. "That covers road maintenance, dock upkeep, snow plowing in winter." She tapped at the ridiculous golf cart sitting crooked at the drive. "And security patrol, which I personally oversee." I followed her gesture, my eyes landing on the spray-painted cart with its flashing yellow light. Security patrol. My lips nearly twitched into a laugh, but the weight of her voice froze it in my throat. She wasn't joking. She believed every word. Sarah, ever the peacemaker, tried to smooth it over. She smiled warmly. "We didn't know there was an HOA, Carol. Our realtor didn't mention it. Nothing came up in closing." For just a second, Carol's mask cracked. Her lips tightened. A shadow flickered across her face. Then she forced a thin smile. "Well, of course there's an HOA. How else would we maintain the integrity of this community?" The word integrity left her lips like a threat. She tapped the binder. "All the rules are in there. Lawn height, trash can placement, boat usage, paint colors. At the back you'll find the membership agreement. Sign it, attach your check, and return it to me within 30 days. Her voice didn't leave space for discussion. No invitation, no courtesy, just an order. I swallowed hard, tried to stay polite. "We'll look it over." But Carol leaned in slightly, her sunglasses flashing in the sun. "Don't just look it over, sign it. It's easier that way, prevents misunderstandings." And just like that, she spun on her heel, marched back to her cart, and roared off down the gravel. The yellow beacon blinked like some twisted crown of authority as she disappeared. Sarah and I stood there in silence. The binder weighed heavy in my hands. Finally, Sarah whispered, "Well, she seems committed." That night when Sarah had gone to bed, I couldn't let it go. My engineer's brain needed answers. I spread out every piece of paperwork, closing documents, survey maps, tax records, across the dining table. I traced boundary lines, cross-checked dates, and then I found it plain as day. Our lot and 4 others like it had been platted back in 1978. The Silver Lake Community Association hadn't even existed until 1991. We were close in proximity, yes, but legally, we weren't part of their development. Carol's jurisdiction ended at her property line. She had no claim over our cabin, no right to demand dues, no authority over us at all. The revelation hit me like cold water. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theater, a carefully constructed illusion of power, and Carol Peters was the star of her own show. I thought ignoring her would be enough, that if I tucked her binder on a shelf and kept my head down, she'd get bored and leave us alone. But that was the first mistake, because Carol wasn't looking for compliance. She was looking for control, and the more we resisted, the more she would escalate. 3 days later, an envelope appeared on my windshield. White, crisp, my name scrawled in stiff letters. Inside was a violation notice. Our crime? Unapproved construction materials. The violation cited the cedar planks stacked neatly beside my garage, the very planks I planned to use for Sarah's planter box. According to Bylaw 7.4, all construction projects required approval from the Architectural Review Committee. A committee, I would soon learn, made up of exactly two people, Carol and one nervous retiree who never seemed to make eye contact. At the bottom of the notice, in Carol's sharp, slanted handwriting, were the words, "This is your only friendly warning. We do things by the book here." Friendly warning. I let out a dry laugh. We had never signed her book. Her rules didn't apply to us, not legally, not in any way. But Carol didn't care about the law, she cared about obedience. I moved the planks into the garage, not because I believed I owed her compliance, but because I didn't want to give her ammunition. I told myself maybe, just maybe, she'd take the hint and back off. But I was wrong, dead wrong. Because what Carol Peters really wanted wasn't money, it wasn't dues, it wasn't even order. What she wanted was power, and she would stop at nothing to get it. The second envelope landed only 3 days later. I found it tucked beneath the doormat, its edges trembling in the summer breeze like a warning flag. Another violation. This time, improper waste receptacle display. Translation: we had set our trash can at the end of the driveway on Tuesday night for Wednesday pickup. Exactly what every other household in the county did. But according to Carol's bylaws, trash cans could not be visible from the road more than 12 hours before pickup. Another $50 fine. A warning that it would double if not cured. I stood in the driveway, the notice shaking in my hand. Not from fear, not yet, from anger, from the realization that this wasn't about bylaws, cedar planks, or trash cans. This was about control. Carol couldn't stand the idea of our family living outside her grip. Our polite refusal to sign her papers wasn't just a rejection of her HOA. It was a rejection of her, and she wasn't going to forgive it. That night I started a folder, a plain manila file with one word scrawled on the tab, Carol. Inside I placed everything: property survey, plat maps, closing documents, her fake binder, the violation slips. I dated each page, recorded every word. My engineer's brain found strange comfort in the process. Document, organize, prepare. If she wanted a war of paper, I would be ready. But Carol didn't just play games. She escalated. Her golf cart began appearing more often, parked across the road from our driveway, the engine idling, yellow light flickering in the dusk. Sometimes she just sat there, clipboard resting on her lap, sunglasses shielding her eyes, staring. If I was sanding the dock, she was there. If Sarah and I tried to sip wine on the porch at sunset, she was there. Not a neighbor, not even a watchdog, a shadow, a sentinel, watching. Sarah tried kindness. One hot afternoon, she walked out with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Carol, you must be roasting out here. Thought you might like a drink." Carol didn't even turn her head. "I'm on duty," she said flatly. "I don't accept beverages while on patrol." Sarah left the glass on the grass by the cart. Hours later, the ice had melted to water, condensation dripping down the glass. Carol finally drove off, leaving it behind like a discarded prop in her play. The message was clear: there would be no truce. And still we tried. For weeks, Sarah and I kept to ourselves, quiet mornings on the porch, evenings by the lake. I told myself she'd grow tired, that bullies eventually moved on, but she didn't. She thrived on it. My 60th birthday should have been a celebration. The air thick with the smell of burgers on the grill, friends laughing on the porch, grandkids racing barefoot through the grass. For a few golden hours, it was perfect. Music low, glasses clinking, the lake shimmering in the background. Exactly the kind of day we had dreamed of when we bought the cabin. And then we heard it. The sputtering roar of Carol's golf cart, engine whining at full throttle, gravel spitting under her tires as she barreled down the road, the yellow beacon spinning like a siren of doom. She didn't stop at the end of the lane. She swerved hard, blocking our driveway entirely, tires screeching, dust flying. 2 of my friends had just pulled up behind her, their car trapped by the barricade she had made of herself. I set down my plate and hurried down the drive. "Carol," I said, trying to steady my voice, "can I help you?" Her chin lifted high, eyes blazing. "You're in violation. Noise levels, excessive vehicles, unauthorized gathering without prior approval." Her words carried across the yard, sharp enough to slice through the laughter. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, frozen mid-conversation. The smell of burgers and charcoal hung heavy, soured by humiliation. "Carol," I said more firmly, This is my property, these are my friends, and you are blocking a county road. Please move your cart. Her laugh was bitter, shrill. This is not a county road. This is community property maintained by association dues. I almost laughed myself, because I could prove otherwise with a single phone call to the county works department, but before I could, one of my friends leaned out the car window. "Ma'am, we're just trying to park. Is there a problem?" Carol's head snapped toward him like a hawk spotting prey. "You are trespassing. No more than 4 guest vehicles permitted without written authorization." She snapped her clipboard shut with finality, her voice booming for everyone to hear. "These are the rules." My patience broke. "Carol, your rules don't apply here. We are not members of your association. Move your vehicle." The silence behind me was unbearable. Guests whispering, Sarah clutching the porch rail, my grandchildren wide-eyed. Carol thrived on it, thrived on making a spectacle, loved having an audience. And that's when Emily walked down the driveway. She looked nothing like a sheriff. Jeans, t-shirt, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She could have been any young woman, calm and unassuming, but there was something in her stride, a confidence, a steadiness. "Hi," she said with an easy smile. "I'm Emily. Is something wrong here?" Carol sized her up, sneering. "Another one of you?" she muttered, then louder. "Yes, there's a problem. This gathering violates multiple community standards, excess traffic, disruptive noise. These people need to disperse." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Which county ordinance are we in violation of exactly?" The question landed like a stone dropped in still water. Carol blinked. "It's not a county ordinance, it's the community bylaws, legally binding." "Legally binding for members," Emily said evenly. She gestured toward me. "My parents aren't members, so again, which law gives you the authority to block this road and detain people from entering private property?" That one word, detain, hung in the air like a knife. Carol's face flushed red. She wasn't used to being questioned. She was used to retirees nodding along, too tired to fight. "You think you're clever," she hissed, "but you're not above the rules, none of you are." She whipped out her phone, snapped a photo of my friend's license plate, scribbled on her clipboard, then stormed back to her cart. She moved it just enough for the car to pass, then parked across the street like a gargoyle, arms crossed, eyes fixed on us for the rest of the afternoon. But the damage was done. The laughter faded, music went quiet, my guests whispered questions. "Is she serious? Can she really do that?" I spent the evening assuring them she had no authority, but the truth was gnawing at me. She was escalating. She wasn't satisfied with warnings anymore. She was pushing harder, testing limits. When the last of the cars pulled away and the night went silent, Sarah and I sat on the porch, too tired to even speak. But Emily stayed behind. She stacked plates in the sink, then sat at the dining table where my Carol folder lay open. I thought she'd laugh at me, shake her head at her old man obsessing over paperwork. But she didn't. She flipped through every page, her brow furrowed, her expression hardening with every violation slip, every scribbled threat. Finally, she looked up at me. Her voice wasn't casual anymore. It wasn't daughterly. It was steel. "Dad, this isn't just annoying. This is criminal behavior." And in her eyes, I saw something Carol would never understand. Authority. Real authority. The kind that could end a bully's reign. The night of my birthday, after the last car pulled away and silence wrapped around the lake, Emily sat across from me at the dining table. The manila folder lay open between us, thick with Carol's letters, maps, and violation slips. I expected her to laugh, to tease me for keeping such a meticulous file, but her face was deadly serious. She flipped through every page slowly, her brow furrowed, her jaw tightening. When she finally looked up, her voice had changed. It wasn't the voice of my daughter anymore. It was the voice of the sheriff. "Dad," she said quietly, "this isn't just harassment, this is criminal behavior." I let out a dry laugh. "Come on, Em, she's ridiculous, sure, but she's not dangerous." Her eyes cut through me. "She blocked the road. She stopped your guests from entering your property. That's unlawful detainment. And these letters? Patterned harassment. If she keeps it up, she could be facing charges." Her words hit me like stones dropping into my gut. I wanted to wave it off, but her expression was unyielding. Bullies with power complexes don't stop on their own, she added. They escalate, and this one, she believes she is the law. That's dangerous. I leaned back, studying her. For a moment, I didn't see my little girl. I didn't see the daughter I once carried on my shoulders. I saw the county sheriff, calm, professional, unflinching. "What do you suggest?" I asked quietly. Emily closed the folder, her hand resting firm on the cover. "You keep documenting every letter, every encounter, every word, build a record, and get a camera. A good one, mounted on the driveway. If she steps foot on your property again, we'll have it on video." Sarah, standing in the doorway, folded her arms. "A camera in our little paradise." Emily turned gently toward her. "Mom, I know it feels invasive, but this isn't about spying, it's about protection. Carol has already crossed lines. The next time it could be worse." Sarah sighed, weary. "All we wanted was peace." "I know," Emily said softly, "and you'll have it, but first you need to be smart." The next week I drove into town and bought a high-definition security camera. I mounted it myself, angled to cover the entire driveway and the stretch of county road beyond. It felt strange, like I was fortifying a cabin instead of living in one. But when I saw the small light glow in the distance, I felt something I hadn't in months: relief. Emily inspected it on her next visit. She nodded once. "Good, that's clear coverage. If she tries anything, we'll have proof." For a while, nothing happened. Carol's golf cart lurked less often, her presence like a storm cloud drifting but never striking. Sarah and I almost believed the worst had passed. Then the brown envelope arrived. It came in the mail, plain and official, with the return address of the county zoning and planning department. At first, I thought it was routine, a tax notice maybe, but when I tore it open, my stomach dropped. Inside was a formal complaint. According to the letter, someone had reported us for unpermitted shoreline construction, specifically accusing us of building our dock without permits or environmental review. I nearly dropped the paper. Our dock wasn't new. It was older than me. My grandfather had built it 50 years ago, long before current regulations even existed. The structure was grandfathered in decades ago, but the complaint meant I had to prove it. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter trembling in my hands. "Sarah," I called. She hurried in, drying her hands on a dish towel. I handed her the paper. She read it, her lips tightening, her eyes narrowing. "Who would?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, we both knew. "Carol." It had her fingerprints all over it. The same obsession with rules, the same need to punish. I spent 2 days in the attic combing through old boxes, receipts from lumber yards dated in the 70s, yellowed photographs of the dock with me standing on it as a boy, survey maps with the structure clearly marked. Piece by piece, I built my defense. My Carol folder swelled thicker, the paper edges curling from constant handling. I typed a 10-page response, diagrams and annotations included. When I dropped the packet at the zoning office, the clerk gave me a sympathetic look. "Mr. Clark," she said softly, "I'm not supposed to say this, but we've seen a lot of these come in from Silver Lake lately, always anonymous, always flimsy." Her meaning was clear. Carol wasn't just targeting me, she was targeting everyone. 2 weeks later, the verdict came back. Complaint dismissed. Our dock was legal, documented, protected. Relief washed over me, but it was hollow, because Carol had still won something. She had stolen my time, my energy, my peace. That night I called Emily. I told her everything, the hours digging through boxes, the sleepless nights writing responses. She listened quietly. When I finished, her voice was calm but sharp. "Dad, this is more serious than you realize. Filing false reports to a government office, that's not just harassment, that's abuse of process, it's a crime." Her words lingered long after we hung up. For the first time, I let myself admit it. Carol wasn't just a nuisance, she wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was dangerous. I walked to my desk, slid open the drawer, and added the zoning complaint to the folder. The file was thick now, heavy in my hands. A record of a woman willing to twist truth into lies, law into weapons. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her voice soft. "How long are we supposed to live like this, Frank?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. All I knew was that Carol was escalating, and somewhere deep in my chest I felt it, the storm was gathering. The first crack appeared at the post office. I was standing in line, bills tucked under my arm, when I spotted him. Gerald, the quiet retiree who trailed behind Carol like a nervous shadow, always scribbling on her clipboard but never quite meeting anyone's eyes. That day he clutched a stack of envelopes to his chest like they might explode. His head jerked at every sound, his shoulders hunched as though trying to disappear. I made a choice, maybe reckless, maybe necessary. I stepped forward and spoke softly. "Morning, Gerald. I'm Frank Clark from the corner lot." He jumped like I'd shouted. His eyes darted left, then right. "Oh, hello," he mumbled, shifting the envelopes in his arms. I lowered my voice. "Listen, I wanted to say I'm sorry if my planter box project caused you any trouble." His head snapped up. For a moment his face softened. "It wasn't any trouble for me," he whispered. Then after a pause he added, "I thought it looked nice." I blinked. Nice? That wasn't the line Carol had been pushing. Gerald glanced around again, then leaned closer. His voice dropped so low I almost couldn't hear it. "She just makes the rules up as she goes," he confessed. "We haven't had a proper vote in over a year. No quorum, no minutes. She sends out emails and says things are passed, but they're not." I felt my pulse quicken. So all those fines, all those notices. He sighed long and heavy like a man deflating. "There's supposed to be a process, but she ignores it. I'm on the committee in name only. It's always her decision. Always." Before I could ask more, he shuffled away, clutching his letters like a lifeline. But the seed had been planted. Carol's kingdom wasn't as solid as she wanted us to believe. The second crack came at the hardware store. I was in the lumber aisle when I ran into Tom, the same man who had waved from his canoe the first week we arrived. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly, eyes darting like he was debating whether to speak. Then he sighed. "Frank, I heard you've had some run-ins." I let out a bitter laugh. "That obvious?" He nodded. "Word gets around. Listen, I'll tell you this. She's been collecting dues, but last winter the plow never came. Said she'd found a cheaper contractor, but when the storm hit, we were snowed in for 3 days. Ended up clearing the road ourselves." I frowned, and the money. Tom's jaw tightened. "Who knows? She claimed it went to expenses, but the dock's rotting. The roads are full of potholes. We don't see much for our $500 a year." I drove home with my mind buzzing. Between Gerald's confession and Tom's quiet frustration, a picture was forming. Carol wasn't protecting the community. She was milking it. That evening, I laid everything out for Emily. She sat at the table, flipping through the folder while I repeated Gerald's words and Tom's complaints. Her jaw clenched tighter with each page. "Dad," she said finally, "this isn't just harassment anymore. This smells like fraud." Fraud, the word tasted bitter. She nodded. "If she's collecting money for services not provided, if she's fabricating rules without votes, that's misrepresentation. And if she's pocketing dues," she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Then she pulled out her phone, tapped quickly, and frowned. "Let's see something." A moment later, her eyes flicked up. "Here it is. According to state records, the Silver Lake Community Association's nonprofit status lapsed 18 months ago." I froze. "Lapsed?" "Which means," Emily said, her voice hard as stone, "legally it doesn't exist. They failed to file their paperwork. On paper, there is no HOA." I stared at her, stunned. "You mean?" "Every fine, every notice, every dollar she's collected." Emily slid the phone across the table, the screen glowing with the state records. "All of it, void. She's been cashing checks under the name of an entity that no longer exists. That's fraud, Dad, serious fraud." For a moment, I just sat there, my hands pressed flat against the table. 20 years Sarah and I had dreamed of peace by this lake. Months we had endured this woman's harassment, her surveillance, her phony fines. And now the truth lay before us. Carol wasn't just a bully. She wasn't just a neighbor drunk on authority. She was a fraud. I rubbed my face, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "So, all this time, she's been playing president of a club that doesn't even exist." "Exactly," Emily said, her voice sharp. "And she doesn't want anyone to know." For the first time since this battle began, I felt it, a spark of hope. Her castle wasn't built on stone, it was built on sand, and the tide was starting to come in. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table long after Sarah had gone to bed, the folder spread wide like a battle map. Emily sat across from me, calm, focused, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "This is it," she said at last. "This is how we bring her down." Her tone wasn't triumphant, it wasn't vengeful, it was steady, certain. "How?" I asked. She held up 2 fingers. "Civil and criminal. Civil, you write a letter not just from you but from a group of concerned property owners. Lay out the facts. Corporate status dissolved. Dues collected without authority. Services not provided. Cite the statutes. Send it to every homeowner. Once the community sees it in black and white, her illusion collapses." I nodded slowly. The engineer in me liked the structure of it. Evidence, documentation, a blueprint for truth. "And criminal?" I asked. Emily's lips pressed thin. "That part will handle itself. Carol thrives on confrontation. Expose her and she'll lash out. When she does, we'll have it on video. Then the charges will stick." I sat back, the plan unfolding in my mind like dominoes. Letters, outrage, confrontation, arrest. Sarah's voice drifted from the bedroom, tired, heavy. "All we wanted was peace." And she was right, that's all we wanted. But peace doesn't always come by ignoring a bully. Sometimes it only comes when you face them head-on. The night we discovered the HOA was legally dead, I sat at the kitchen table with papers spread wide like blueprints of war. The Carol folder had grown into a monster. Maps, violation slips, letters, photographs. All the evidence of months stolen from our peace. Emily sat across from me, calm as ever, flipping through Carol's so-called bylaws with the sharp focus of a surgeon. "This is it," she said firmly. "This is how we bring her down." So we got to work. The next morning I drafted a letter. I wrote it carefully, not with rage but with precision. I laid out the facts in black and white. The Silver Lake Community Association's nonprofit status had lapsed 18 months earlier. Any dues collected under its name were legally void. Services like snow plowing and dock maintenance had not been provided despite funds collected. Enforcement actions, fines, and notices had no legal authority. I closed with one request: an accounting of funds and an emergency meeting to elect a legitimate, legally recognized board. No anger, no insults, just truth. Truth so plain it could not be ignored. Emily read it aloud. She nodded once. "Perfect. Nobody can accuse you of being vindictive. You're giving them facts and a way forward." That afternoon, we gathered addresses from county tax records. By evening, 39 envelopes sat in neat rows on the table, stamped and ready. When I slid them into the blue mailbox the next morning, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders, only to settle again heavier. Because once those letters landed, there would be no turning back. Friday evening, the first sparks flew. From my porch, I watched neighbors stroll to their mailboxes. Couples paused at the end of their driveways, frowning at the envelopes. Some tore them open on the spot, scanning quickly, their brows furrowing deeper with every line. Others tucked them under their arms, retreating indoors. Curtains twitched. Voices rose behind screen doors. It was like watching a fuse burn, slow, inevitable, unstoppable. By Saturday morning, the lake hummed with unease. Tom from the hardware store waved to me across the cove, a wave different than before. Hesitant, thoughtful. Later, I saw him standing with another neighbor, heads bent close over the letter, their voices low. Even Gerald, jittery Gerald, stood at the post office with his envelope half out of his pocket, lips moving as if rehearsing something he might dare to say aloud one day. The hive was stirring, and Carol knew it. Her golf cart made rounds faster now, the yellow light spinning like a warning siren. Less patrol, more crusade. She stopped at driveways, waving her clipboard like a sword, her words clipped and sharp. From my porch, I couldn't hear her, but I saw the body language, neighbors leaning back, arms crossed, shaking their heads, refusing to nod the way they once did. Her empire was wobbling. By Sunday, the silence had changed. It wasn't just us she glared at anymore. Now, when her cart idled across the road, I saw curtains rustle in houses down the street. Faces peeked out. People weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at her with doubt. And that's when the fuse reached the powder. Sunday afternoon, I was sanding the arm of an old Adirondack chair when I heard the shrill buzz of Carol's cart. Only this time it didn't stop across the street. It barreled straight into our yard, tires tearing up Sarah's flower bed. The cart screeched to a halt, and Carol leapt out, face red, fists clenched around a crumpled copy of the letter. "You," she screamed, pointing at me with a trembling hand. "How dare you?" Sarah rushed to the doorway, her hand pressed over her mouth. Down by the dock, Emily looked up from the water, towel draped around her shoulders, her eyes narrowing. Carol stormed up the lawn, her voice cracking with rage. "Lies, all of it lies. After everything I've done for this community, you spread poison against me." I set the sander down carefully, my heart hammering. "Carol, you're trespassing. Please step off my property." "Your property?" she shrieked. "This is my community. I built it, I protect it, and you dare challenge me." Her hands shook violently, the letter crumpling tighter in her grip. She looked less like a president and more like a cornered animal. "The association is dissolved, Carol," I said firmly. "You have no authority here. People deserve to know the truth." "The money is accounted for," she snapped. "Expenses, legal fees, insurance, you wouldn't understand." Her voice cracked with hysteria. She was unraveling in broad daylight in front of my wife, my daughter, my home. And thanks to the glowing red light of the camera above the driveway, every second was being recorded. Emily began walking up the lawn, calm, deliberate. To anyone else, she looked like a protective daughter stepping between her parents and a raging neighbor. But I knew her stride. It was the walk of authority. Carol spun toward her, wild-eyed. You're with them. You think you can ignore the rules? Not in my community." "Ma'am," Emily said evenly, her voice low but firm, "I think you should calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down," Carol screeched. "You people need to learn a lesson." And then her hand jerked behind her back. My blood froze. For the first time I noticed it, the holster, the glint of metal. In one terrifying motion, Carol pulled out a black handgun and leveled it at Emily's chest. "Hands up," she screamed, eyes wide, face twisted with rage. "You are trespassing on private community property. I am making a citizen's arrest." The world stopped. Sarah gasped behind me. My son-in-law, halfway up from the dock, froze mid-step. My grandchildren went silent, their laughter strangled in their throats. And Emily didn't flinch. She raised her hands slowly, calmly. When she spoke, her voice had shifted, no longer casual, no longer daughterly. It was steel. "Ma'am, my name is Emily Clark. I am the sheriff of this county. You are committing aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Put the gun down now." Carol's jaw dropped. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes, but only for a second. Then she laughed, a high, broken, jagged laugh. "Sheriff, don't make me laugh. Around here, I'm the sheriff." The words tore through the summer air like a curse, and in that moment I knew the bomb had gone off. The barrel of that gun shimmered in the sunlight, a black hole aimed squarely at my daughter's chest. My pulse pounded so hard I thought it would split my ribs. Sarah clutched the porch rail, whispering prayers under her breath. But Emily, she was steady, calm. Her hands hovered just above her shoulders, palms out, her eyes locked on Carol's trembling hands. "Ma'am," she said again, her tone like iron wrapped in velvet, "put the weapon down, right now." Carol's laugh curdled the air. "You don't give me orders, not here, not in my community." Behind me, I heard the faint shuffle of feet. My grandchildren pressed against the screen door, wide-eyed, frozen. Every instinct in me screamed to shield them, to throw myself in front of Emily, to end this madness. But one glance at her face stopped me. Her expression wasn't fear, it was control. And control, I realized, was the only thing keeping us alive. Carol's knuckles whitened on the grip. Her arms shook under the weight of the gun, and yet she kept screaming. "You think your letter scared me? You think your lies will turn them against me? No, I built this community. Without me, this place would collapse." Her words spiraled into the air, hysterical, broken. The more she shouted, the more unhinged she sounded. Neighbors began emerging from their porches, drawn by the noise. One by one, doors creaked open. Eyes peered out. voices whispered. And Carol, still gripping that gun, was too far gone to notice. "Drop the weapon," Emily commanded, her voice cutting sharp. "This is your last warning." Carol snarled. "Or what? You'll arrest me? You, a little girl playing dress-up. This is my lake, my law." Then came the sound that changed everything. A faint wail in the distance, growing louder sirens. Carol froze, her eyes darting toward the road. The sound grew sharper, nearer, winding through the trees. First one siren, then two, then three. Red and blue lights flickered faintly through the pines. And that's when Emily made her move. Her voice dropped, low and cold. "They're coming for you, Carol, right now. Every neighbor is watching. Every camera is rolling. If you don't put that gun down, you will not walk away from this." For a heartbeat, Carol stood suspended between madness and reason. Her eyes darted to the road, to the gathering crowd, to the gun trembling in her hands. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Then she screamed, a wild animal sound, and flung the pistol to the grass. It landed with a dull thud, spinning once before lying still. Relief rushed through my chest, but it wasn't over. Within moments, the sheriff's cruisers screeched to a halt at the end of the drive. Uniformed deputies spilled out, weapons drawn, voices booming commands. "Step back, hands where we can see them." Emily raised her voice above the chaos. "She's disarmed, guns on the ground, suspect in front of me." The deputies advanced swiftly, surrounding Carol. One kicked the weapon farther away while another snapped handcuffs around her wrists. Carol thrashed, shrieking, "No, you can't do this. I am the president. I am the law here." The deputies didn't flinch. They read her rights as neighbors gathered at the edges of the lawn, whispering, recording, bearing witness. The Queen of Silver Lake was being dragged away in the back of a cruiser, her yellow golf cart abandoned, its beacon light still spinning uselessly in the sun. I stood rooted to the ground, my chest heaving, my legs weak. Sarah slipped her hand into mine, her grip trembling. My grandchildren pressed against us, their eyes wide, their faces pale. And Emily, my daughter, my sheriff, stood in the center of it all, calm and unshaken, as though she had known this moment was inevitable. One deputy approached her. "Sheriff Clark, you all right?" She nodded. "I'm fine. Secure the weapon, and make sure the neighbors know they're safe now." He nodded briskly and returned to the task. Safe, the word echoed in my chest, foreign after so many months of tension. Carol's voice still rang faintly from the cruiser, muffled and frantic. "They'll see, they'll thank me, you'll all regret this." But no one moved to defend her. Not Gerald, not Tom, not a single soul. Instead, heads shook, arms folded. Neighbors who had once nodded politely at her commands now turned away in silence. The illusion of her power had shattered, and all that remained was the truth. She was nothing more than a bully with a badge she had pinned on herself. When the cruisers finally rolled away, sirens fatting into the distance, the yard was left in stunned quiet. The cicadas resumed their song, the lake shimmered under the fatting sun, and life began to return to the air. Sarah pressed against me, tears streaking her cheeks. "It's over," she whispered. But Emily shook her head. "Not yet. Arrest is just the first step. Now comes the evidence, the accounting, the trial." She turned to me, her eyes steady. "That folder of yours, Dad, it's going to be the nail in her coffin." I looked at the thick stack of papers resting on the porch table, edges curled from months of handling. What had once been my burden now gleamed like a weapon of its own, truth, sharp enough to cut through lies. For the first time in months I felt it, hope, real hope. But beneath it something deeper stirred, a lesson heavy but clear. Power without accountability will always rot. And when it rots long enough, it poisons everything it touches, until someone finally stands up and says, "Enough." The silence after Carol's arrest hung over Silver Lake like mist. For weeks, the only evidence of her presence was the abandoned golf cart, parked crooked in her driveway, its yellow beacon collecting dust. Neighbors walked past it cautiously, like a monument to fear that had finally crumbled. But peace didn't return overnight. It came slowly in fragments. The first came in the mail, A letter from the county prosecutor's office, thanking me for my cooperation and confirming the charges filed. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, harassment, fraud, and abuse of process. I read the words twice, then slid the paper into my folder, the one that had begun as my burden but now felt like a shield. The second fragment came when Gerald knocked on my door. I found him standing there, his shoulders hunched as always, but his eyes were softer. He held out an envelope with trembling hands. "For the community fund," he said awkwardly. "We're starting fresh. Thought you might like to be part of it." Inside was a simple letter signed by 6 neighbors. They proposed forming a real association, voluntary, transparent, legal. One where decisions were voted on, finances were open, and no one ruled by fear. For the first time, I didn't feel resistance at the word association. Instead, I felt something else, belonging. Tom came by a week later, hammer slung over his shoulder. "Heard your dock could use some repair," he said with a grin. Together, we replaced rotting boards side by side, the smell of fresh cedar rising into the warm air. We worked in silence mostly, but every now and then he'd glance at me and nod, a nod that said more than words: gratitude, respect. And then came the trial. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper. Carol sat at the defense table, her hair pulled tight, her face gaunt, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Gone was the Queen of Silver Lake. She looked smaller somehow, deflated. The yellow vest and fake badge were gone, replaced by a plain blouse that did nothing to hide the cracks in her armor. When the prosecutor presented the evidence, it was my folder they laid on the table. Page after page. Letters, maps, notices, photographs, even the zoning complaint she had filed against me. Every lie, every threat, every abuse of power cataloged and exposed. The deputies who had arrested her testified. Gerald spoke, his voice shaking about the meetings that never happened, the rules invented on the spot. Tom described the missing plow funds, the potholes, the money gone with no trace. And then the video played, the one from my driveway camera. Carol storming up the lawn, Carol screaming. Carol pointing a gun at Emily. The courtroom went silent, the only sound the hollow playback of her own voice. "Around here, I'm the sheriff." When the jury returned, the verdict was swift. Guilty on all counts. I watched as the bailiff led her away, shackles clinking softly. She turned once, her eyes scanning the room, but there was no empire left to rule. No clipboard, no neighbors nodding in fearful silence, just empty air. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot. Sarah slipped her arm into mine, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's really over," she whispered. Emily stood beside us, steady, her badge glinting faintly in the sun. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't gloating, she simply looked relieved. "Justice isn't about winning," she said softly. "It's about restoring balance, about giving people their lives back." Her words settled deep into me, because that's exactly what had been stolen from us, our lives, our peace, our mornings by the lake, our laughter on the porch, our grandchildren's carefree play. And now, slowly, piece by piece, we were taking it back. The lake was never the same after Carol, but maybe it was better. Neighbors talked more. We waved across coves, stopped at mailboxes, shared stories on porches. For the first time, Silver Lake felt like a true community, not one ruled by fear, but one held together by choice, by respect. On quiet mornings, Sarah and I would sip coffee on the porch and watch the mist rise from the water. Emily visited often, her cruiser parked at the edge of the drive, her presence both daughterly and official. The grandchildren laughed on the dock again, their shouts echoing across the water. Life returned. And yet sometimes at night, when the moonlight shimmered across the lake, I'd remember that moment. The gun, the shouting, the words that still burned in my memory. "Around here, I'm the sheriff." It was the cry of a woman who believed power came from fear, from control, from domination. But power built on lies always crumbles. Emily was right. Justice isn't about revenge, it isn't about pride. It's about restoring what was stolen, peace, dignity, safety. As I sit here now, watching the sun sink behind the pines, I think of the lesson carved into every line of this story. Sometimes, the strongest people aren't the ones who fight the loudest. They're the ones who endure long enough to let truth do the fighting for them. And sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones wearing badges they gave themselves. But monsters fall, and peace, though fragile, always finds its way back. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.